Welcome back to the fifth and last part of the pyramid story. The last sentence of the fourth part was this: "As I said before, my son, you have passed the trial," my teacher says gravely, emphasizing each word. "Now it is up to us to tell you why the pyramid is organized as it is. You have clearly described your feelings and your thoughts, and it is my impression that you perceived the changes between your varying states of mind as a progressive process, even though you are not consciously aware of the cause of and the purpose of this evolution. You see, you have moved through yourself, literally. You have been confronted with the layers of consciousness which succeed each other in your own inner self. You have been victorious in the struggle with the challenges of each single layer, and thus you have transcended them. Now you have reached the most secret chamber of the pyramid, corresponding to the secret chamber within each human individual, the inner locality from which all can be observed. As you noted when you entered this place, this room is not accessible from the outside. As with the chamber of human wisdom, this room can be found only by crossing the frontier of death, that is, by crossing the threshold of consciousness, which marks the dividing line between and the connection between soul and body. All human beings have such a chamber in the inner, higher layers of consciousness, a place wherein to collect and then distribute the formative and constructive forces of life. But not all are aware of this, even though everyone consciously or unconsciously draws upon its inexhaustible life force. The aim of the human journey through life is to attain full union with the light of wisdom within ourselves. And you must note this: only out there in life will one find the ascending path, the road that leads to the goal. You appear confused, my dear disciple, soon to be my friend and brother. Did you expect life's riddles to be unraveled for you here in this room? I see that you had hoped for this, even though we have understood very well your urge to emerge from this pyramid and live among human beings with or without wisdom. And here you answer the question yourself, for the urge to live among human beings contains the key to all wisdom. The second secret of the pyramid, the first was the existence of this chamber, is that no one attains wisdom from passing through an initiation. This is one of the reasons the pyramid has no capstone. It is a model of human consciousness, but only a model. As a true priest, you will know that you do not differ from other people. What you have learned here and through your early training all serves the same enlightening purpose: to show you the basic equality and similarity between all human beings. The true priest does not tell those who come in search of his assistance, "Do this even though you do not understand why, for I have gained much knowledge and wisdom from my initiation as a priest which is beyond your understanding." The true priest must recognize himself within those who seek his counsel and relate to them as an equal, while he tries to awaken the ability of such unfortunate persons to see through their own situations. When you leave this building, my son, only then will your process of initiation truly begin. Only then, through your struggles as a human, you can begin to control and understand the forces you have encountered in such a concentrated form in here, inside the pyramid. You have ascended through the layers within yourself, and you have related your account of this ascent to us in clear and meaningful words. What you do not know is that this system of corridors of this wise structure have been laid out in such a way as to call forth, quite spontaneously, the sensations and the states of mind that you have been crawling through. You have observed the grammar of the language of the pyramid. You have discovered the symbolism in upward movement, downward movement, and of moving straight ahead within finished and unfinished chambers, but there are still subtler laws between the placement of the rooms and passageways. In future, you will become acquainted with this knowledge. It is not part of the program of this initiation. My son, do you wish to ask anything of us? I feel as if I have fallen from a high place mentally. I blink. The entire stylishly solemn atmosphere of the room seems to have vanished. Among the priests, the mood is now clearly relaxed. A link begins to form in my mind between the paradox that everyone here is outside of their physical bodies, demonstrating in practice the difference between life and death, and the fact that everyone acts as if it is perfectly natural, even amusing, that the answers to the riddle of life are not to be found here inside the pyramid. I can feel the beginning of a kind of fraternal bond, quite unceremonious, yet intimately familiar with the span between life and death. This is a feeling I will never forget, although suddenly everything has the atmosphere of an everyday occurrence. I hardly know what question to ask. It all seems so very simple. Still, I feel there is something about which I must know more. I look inquisitively at my teacher and speak again. What happens if a disciple chooses one of the other two pyramids? And why did I feel that strangling constriction around my throat at the end of the Great Hall? What were the forces against which I was struggling? This truth I will relate to you as best I can, even though there are aspects of this question I cannot answer for you, because only you yourself can and are allowed to comprehend those inner forces with which you will meet again in the course of your life. To know the duality of soul and body as a certainty is the primary aim of the processes operating within all three of these pyramids. Many aspirants believe that soul and body are one, and for these persons it will be more difficult to draw knowledge from the chamber of inner wisdom. To reach the chamber of one's innermost wisdom, one must, as I have already said, cross the threshold of death. This, of course, does not mean that one must physically die. No. To cross the frontier of death is a process within your mind, a process that instills in you the confidence to acknowledge your existence on both sides of this boundary, a process which teaches you how the two worlds interpenetrate and communicate with each other. This boundary is not breached by the simple act of being freed from the confines of your body, an act members of the priesthood have been trained to help others achieve with their assistance. At the time you entered the sarcophagus to lie down, we were not certain whether you would reach the final destination of your ascent, for your goal was to free your soul from your body of your own accord, without feeling this as somehow unusual or unnatural. The fact that you, as an act of your own free will, rose from the coffin was a result of your preceding victory over the guardian of the threshold of death, the struggle you encountered when you stood on the large block of stone at the end of the great hall of the judges. In the two other pyramids, initiates are not faced with the experience of this struggle, and therefore we must assist them to get free of their bodies. The other pyramids also contain coffins, through which we may impart to the disciple a certainty that the soul and the body are two. But we cannot help them understand the interconnection of the two levels of consciousness. For, as I have already said, this intimate knowledge can be conveyed only to those who, by an act of will, cross the frontier of death, and by doing so empower themselves to live within their own bodies as a conscious act of free will. To perceive the body as a friend and a useful vehicle for the spirit during its incarnation in the physical world is the true condition for wisdom. Partial initiations, as with those experienced in the other two pyramids, invoke the danger, bring with them the risk, that the disciple will experience his body as an enemy, as something to be defeated or to run away from. So instructors within the priesthood must follow such partial initiations with intense supervision and guidance, else the disciple will soon fall victim to the paradoxical idea that God allows us to incarnate in physical bodies only to expend all our spiritual energy seeking to escape back into the spiritual world. Such misguided aspirants will expend more energy on dominating their natural physical needs than on helping their fellow being come to the understanding that love of life is the path of true wisdom. Just as one would never require a gazelle to serve as a pet for one's children without being fed, or require a camel to carry one's burdens without drinking water, so would it be pointless to make hunger and torture of the physical body the condition for acquiring spiritual knowledge. True wisdom comprehends all aspects of existence, from the physical to the transcendental. However, to be able to use your body on its own terms, but in the service of wisdom, you must know the sequence of layers of consciousness that range from the physical through to the spiritual, and understand the interrelations between them. In this respect, the design of this pyramid is of considerable help. By ascending through this model of the inner structure of an incarnated human being, you are well prepared for the walk that awaits you in your earthly life. The ascent you have completed, my son, included the crossing of the threshold of death and the struggle with the guardian of this boundary. For me to answer your question about the sensation of the grasping at your throat, I must first clearly outline what has happened to you. Or have you already understood what I mean to say? Is there something you wish to add? Listening to my teacher's words, I've been showing sign of certain unease, signs that said there were still questions lingering in my mind. This is why he has interrupted himself. But why are people sent into the other two pyramids if their choices lead away from the truth found in here? I asked, puzzled and somewhat angered. Why cannot everyone be required to crawl through this pyramid? It is not for us as priests to direct the course of others' lives. All life is based upon the unconditional right of your own free will to choose the path each feels moved to follow. Many come to us demanding to be initiated as priests. We can advise and guide, but not use force. The way of wisdom is open to us all. The study of the laws and paths of life is open to everybody. A priest cannot turn seekers away from a path that they themselves perceive as the path to truth. Sometimes it is difficult to convince a seeking person that there are paths to God other than through priesthood. When someone insists repeatedly to be instructed, to be led through every exam and trial associated with priesthood, it is useless to bar their way. After years of preparation, they will then face the choice, as were you, of entering one of the three pyramids. As you know, we impress upon every disciple that this choice must be carefully considered and then carried through without hesitation. If you wonder about the light here, it just became darker because of some clouds, so we had to switch on a few more lamps. Back to the story. the priest says, in order to make the Great Pyramid less attractive, we have removed its top. And there are 3 reasons why the top does not exist. As I have said before, the missing capstone symbolizes firstly that none attain wisdom by simply partaking of an initiation ceremony, no matter how cleverly arranged. Secondly, the pyramid is a model of the incarnated human being, and it is to be noted that it is a model which bears the mark of truth, and that no human being is perfect. Were the pyramid intended to symbolize the perfect human being, the corridors would have been placed differently from where they are now. There would be but a single long winding staircase up through the pyramid's central axis, interconnecting the different chambers of consciousness with each other. In that case, the lines of the base and sides of the pyramid would all be identical and not as they are now, differing from each other, so that to cause the building to seem somewhat lower than if the dimensions of the structure formed an exact equilateral pyramid. Of course, the cap structure would then be in its place. Constructing a model to reflect the perfect human being would be pointless, for no perfect individual would ever need to crawl through its passageways to achieve understanding, and not so perfect human beings would be precluded from reaching any self-understanding by moving through a model which mirrored their own consciousness. The truthfulness built into the design of the pyramid leads indirectly to the third reason for the form of this pyramid. An incomplete exterior renders the structure less attractive to the individual who bases his judgments on the apparent beauty of external surfaces, or is deterred by an apparent imperfection. Enlightened by this knowledge, you will understand that the largest pyramid, the one wherein you stand, is the only perfect one of the 3, for it honestly reflects the truth. The other 2 structures have a perfect external language, but possesses no inner language. They have no elaborate system of passageways, as does this pyramid, only some smaller corridors designed to give the aspirant the feeling of completing a task or of making progress through a process. When an instructor encounters the type of disciple who demands to be taken through all the trials, the challenge for the priesthood is how to make the best of the situation and avert the disaster that would invariably befall that the disciple unprepared to encounter his or her own limitations within the Great Pyramid, or what we might call the guardian of the threshold, positioned at the end of the Great. You see, the structural harmonics of the pyramid meet here in a powerful center of energy. The energy of the pyramid itself radiates through and dissolves accumulations of fear, distortions, repressions, or similar blockages which the individual human being struggling through life pushes aside or ahead towards a confrontation in, it's to be hoped, a very distant future. These accumulations of unrefined soul waste matter are brought to the surface because the radiations of the pyramid act in concert with the acoustical vibrations of the Great Hall. The hall has been constructed in a manner that influences the non-physical center of energy found in the region of the throat of every human being. This point is the nexus of communication between 2 levels of consciousness, the physical and the non-physical. And in this area are collected the repressed emotions and distorted ideas about the true relationship between life and death, which less valiant human beings try to repress and, hoping to avoid confrontation, push from their ordinary waking consciousness. The dogs have come back. You have experienced for yourself, both the first and the second time you were in the Great Hall with the judges, how your own fear and death urges constricted your throat. And as you have learned through your own experience, the judges are not simply statues. They exist in the Great Hall, in the same way that your own judgments of your actions exist within the very energy center, which interacts with the acoustics in the Great Hall. Through the sense of hearing, infinitely fine substances are stimulated in your body, and the sound impression propagates itself from there through to the non-physical energy center which I have described to you. You may thank your stay within the heart chamber for preserving your sanity at the moment of your confrontation with the guardian of the threshold. Among the priesthood we call the chamber of the first encounter with the soul. You may call it whatever you like. Only those ones who fully accept their right to exist, in spite of their faults and shortcomings, will emerge victorious from a confrontation with these shortcomings. Engaging in this confrontation unprepared or at the wrong moment could lead to lifelong loss of one's sanity. What are we to do then, if an individual unprepared from the depth of his being insists upon examination within the pyramids on the same footing as the rest of the disciples? A valid request which we may not disregard indefinitely. We must take care that this disciple avoids the confrontation with the guardian of the threshold, while ensuring that he still experiences that soul and body are two. These partial initiations are possible in all three pyramids. Even if the person not in complete balance should choose this pyramid, we simply divert the disciple from traveling upwards out of the underground chamber and instead free him or her from the body down there. The disciple will then, in his liberated state, be led through the corridors of the pyramid to this room or to one of the nearby temples according to circumstances. When the trials of these disciples are over and they have rejoined their physical bodies, we assign these new members of the priesthoods tasks which correspond to their level of spiritual insight. The assignment of these priests will usually be tasks that do not stimulate their urges to escape from their bodies, but encourage them to learn to know it well, for instance by practicing the medical arts. My son, have I answered your questions to your satisfaction? Please ask, for nothing you desire to know will be withheld from you, provided those of us gathered here are able to answer you, of course. We are in no way omniscient. We are but seekers like yourself. Yet, through our education and experience gained from, among other things, our lessons learned within this pyramid, we have learned quite a few things about life. Much yet remains still hidden, many lessons that only life itself can teach. We have all unfinished business with friends and antagonists from this and earlier lifetimes, and these matters may only be settled through contact with the people directly involved. It is obvious that I cannot grant to my brother what I took away from him in the past by seeking out wisdom within a pyramid. All of us must go out into life, even the wisest of priests. Out of pure curiosity, I want to ask more. For instance, what was the nature of the faint green light? Who controlled the barriers? How did they open and close trapdoors without rope or levers? The words of my teacher have filled me with images and impressions that will require careful consideration, impressions which must be worked through first. The tone of his concluding words imparts an unspoken suggestion that we should altogether return to life in the outside world. I begin to long for my physical body. If it is as if the cord, the luminous thread leading from my non-material self to the head of my physical body, begins to pull at me. It wants to go home. No, I have nothing more to ask at this time. I understand there will be other occasions to receive answers and inquire about the things I would like to know. The assembled priests must have read into my thoughts, for when I lift my head, I see that they have all departed. Only my teacher remains, smiling into my thoughtful but calm face. Supported by his hand, I climb down from the table, and together we move downward toward the room where my body rests inside the coffin. This time we do not pass through any corridors or stairwells, but directly through the stone walls, diagonally down to the chamber of the threshold. Now, standing again before the sarcophagus, I pause to carefully observe the body into which I must return. A mixture of cheerfulness and compassion merge into a smiling unity as I realize how I actually look. Bruises, bumps and cuts over both eyes, dark streaks of dried blood marking one side of my face, scrapes and scratches on my legs, arms, shoulders and back. Along with all this, I'm so completely dusty and dirty that a light grey layer covers my brown skin. Then I look to the left at my teacher, who smilingly observes my confrontation with this fellow in the coffin. We look each other in the eye, and the wonderfully grotesque and lovable human aspect of this situation causes us both to burst out in uninhibited, loud, hearty laughter. We laugh, and our laughter resounds in the non-physical rooms and halls of the pyramid. The echoes of our laughter haven't yet faded before this wonderful heartiness is transformed into the warm joy of being able to retrieve my place in my good old body that is not so old after all. Of my own free will and fully conscious of the differences between the powers and mobility of the physical and of the spiritual body, I lie back down in the coffin. I leave behind my smiling and laughing teacher, who, like me, departs back to his own physical body so that we may meet in the earthly world. With a feeling of being startled, like suddenly falling while in a dream, I wake up and open my eyes inside the stone coffin. It is still dark, but I hear voices. Slowly the coffin lid is slid aside by 4 strong men, whom I recognize as the temple gardeners, and they again place the lid against the wall. Lights flicker, there are torches. Okar carries one, and my dear teacher has just entered the room with another. I'm helped from the sarcophagus. It takes a few minutes before I'm able to stand up steadily again. My limbs are slightly stiff from being immobile during my prolonged rest in the bottom of the sarcophagus. It is as if the echoing laughter is still suspended in the air, but no one is laughing. Our exchange of glances is grave and intense as we begin going back. My teacher walks ahead with his torch. The temple servants and I follow behind with Okar and his torch at the end of our entourage. We pass the great hall with the judges, who now say nothing, now they are only statues. I look at them as I would at old acquaintances. We have shared something, the statues and I. We move on through the corridor at the end of the great hall, the one I did not pass through before. We take a few steps up the first descending corridor and emerge into the open air. What a feeling! The evening sun is setting. I look inquisitively at Okar, and he nods. 1 day and 1 night. I feel as if centuries have passed. The air is fresh and liberating. The world is new and challenging. I feel as if I have been reborn. At the bottom of the stairs, the other priests are gathered, waiting. They bid me welcome back into the world and welcomed into their midst. Tomorrow is my day of rest, while the next day I will be designated a priest and given my new name in a solemn ceremony to be held in the garden of the temple. We pass by the Sphinx, and I stand there a moment while a few of the priests walking before me turn around to observe my reaction. The Sphinx lifts its human head out of its animal body, one part of it surveying the other. It can see heaven from the earth. What a simple and yet profoundly meaningful symbol. It is incredible that I have not seen this before. The smiling eyes of my brother priests confirm that I am not alone in this knowledge, and neither will I be alone in the future. Happily I follow them. Happily I place my bare feet, one foot after the other, into the warm sand, which sifts up between my toes. This was the end of the pyramid story. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the cameraman Adam, without whom I could never have done this. Bye for now.